Greetings everyone, Slizzle466 here, and in today's video, we're looking at some of the best decks to ladder with in Wild for March 2021. We're looking at 18 decks because I have 18 deck slots, so you might see some decks missing. For example, Big Shaman, Dead Man's Hand Warrior, to name a couple, but these are the top 18 that I think are the best. We start with Odd Demon Hunter by Bat Mazel. This is the heavy on the one drop build of Odd Demon Hunter that we're all used to seeing by now. It's got a couple 3-drops in the middle here. Dreadlord's Bite is just a nice way to control the board. Relentless Pursuit is some nice burst, which also makes you immune, which is really useful for trading if necessary. Stilt Stepper is one of the reasons you're running so many 1-drops, just to get that extra attack off the card draw. And then you've got Leroy Jenkins as a finisher. Looking at Druid, we have actually a couple Druid decks to look at. We've got Aggro Druid. Now, Aggro Druid has taken a little bit of a change. This is a list that has been popularized from the Chinese server. So you'll notice there's no Savage Roar in here. Instead, there's Arbor Up. It turns out Arbor Up is really, really good, especially considering you get board as well as the attack buff. You'll also see that there is a Guess the Weight in here, just to help you get a bit of card draw. There's Nature Studies in here to help you discover some spells, and also that discount is quite helpful. So this is a really nice build of Aggro Druid that I'd encourage that you give a shot. The other Druid deck I want to mention is Jade Druid. This is a list by a player called Digged In Bro, and it's the double Yogg Druid, so it's only running a single idol. And so if the idle plan isn't working out for you, maybe you get Geisted, maybe it gets Ticketus or whatever, you've got your double Yogg as a backup plan if the Jade plan doesn't work your way. The other Druid deck to look at is a Token Druid. This is a list by Keith Numbers. So I actually think this is better than Aggro Druid. And essentially how it works is you can develop boards using your Whispering Woods and your Glowfly Swarms. You buff them up with your Arbor Ups. You've got your Savage Roars, your Branching Paths in here. Because of the Solar Eclipse and the Lunar Eclipses, you can cheat out your spells, have them play multiple times, so you can just get ridiculous lethals out of nowhere. In some cases, it is more difficult to play than Aggro Druid, but it is a stronger deck once you master how to pilot it. Now, looking at Hunter, which makes a return to these best deck videos. We haven't seen Hunter for a while. We've got Tonk Hunter by dAwA. How this deck works is you want to play Ursatron to try and draw your Oblivitron or your Darkmoon Tonk. With the Oblivitron, you trigger the Darkmoon Tonk's Death Rattle as well as summon it. And the big thing about the Darkmoon Tonk is that these 4 missiles that fire randomly for 2 damage, they don't just hit minions, but they also hit your opponent's face. And so, because of that, you can try and trigger it multiple times with your Necromechanic. You can also trigger it with Play Dead, Feign Death, 9 lives. So you just keep on doing the Tonk effect over and over until your opponent eventually dies. Looking at Mage, I've only got a couple Mage decks. There are no Reno Mage decks in here because they're just not the greatest in the meta right now. But we do have Quest Mage. Quest Mage is very volatile to aggro, so do be careful here. It is really good against slower decks though, so this is a list by Corbett. And it's just your stock Quest Mage list. It's really good to ladder with. Another list you might want to ladder with, which is a lot better if you want to play Mage, is Secret Mage. This is a list by Keith Numbers. Again, it's pretty stock. There is an Ice Block in here, which you could consider tech. So you might want to swap out the Ice Block for a Flame Ward. You'll notice there are no Flame Wards in this list. But otherwise, it's Secret Mage. It's very good at what it does. Looking at Paladin, although there are lots of people messing around with various Paladin archetypes, basically having the animated Broomstick Lord Barov is what makes most Paladin decks work. But if you want to just play a solid, consistent Paladin deck, go with Odd Paladin. This is a list by a player called Lorist, and it's pretty stock when you have a look at it. There is an Ironbeak Owl teched in here, which is nice if you're having trouble against Void Lords from Warlocks or against Big Priests, but it's not going to guarantee to help you all the time. But otherwise, it's Odd Paladin, it's good at what it does, and it's a good deck to ladder with. Looking at Priest, we have the two Priest decks that you're probably expecting to see. We have Big Priest by a player called Nox Skater Jr. This is a little bit of a greedier Big Priest list than you may have seen. There is a single Idol of Yashaj in here, which can cause a lot of problems against slower decks. But to compensate the greed, there's also a Ziliax in here, which really helps against aggro decks, since Big Priest performs quite poorly against very aggressive decks, but very well against slower decks. The other list from Priest here is Reno Priest by a player called dAwA. And this is a very, very well-tuned list for Reno Priest for the current meta. So you'll notice that there are Glacial Shards in here. This helps you against Kingsbane Rogues and Darkglare Warlocks. There's a Wave of Apathy in here to help you against Darkglare Warlocks. Otherwise, it's just a solid build of Reno Priest, and you'll very consistently climb with this build. Looking at Rogue, we have Mill Rogue. I don't know a lot about Mill Rogue because it's a difficult deck to play and I haven't learned it properly. But if you want to play Mill Rogue, I would highly recommend going with Memnock's list. Now, Mill Rogue is very weak against aggro, so that's why you'll notice that there are two Deathlords in here which really help. But otherwise, once you get the hang of this, it's actually quite powerful. I'd probably place it maybe around tier 2. But otherwise, very fun list to play with, very frustrating for your opponent to play against. Kingsbane Rogue. This is my take on Kingsbane Rogue. So basically, I just took the stock Kingsbane Rogue lists that are floating around, but I took out the oil, the 4-mana oil, and I put in Penflingers. One of my viewers in chat was telling me how Penflingers in Kingsbane Rogue is pretty good. And I've been queuing into a lot of other Kingsbane Rogue players running Penflinger as well. So I really like this substitution over the Sharp Sword Oil. You might want to try it out as well. Looking at Odd Rogue, again featuring one of my lists. This is a list that I use to help secure an 11-star bonus on my EU account. And again, there's nothing particularly fancy about this list. But one thing I really like is the inclusion of 2 Sinister Strikes. Some people like to include Glacial Shards. Some people like to include Evil Miscreants. It really depends on your meta. But as I was queuing into a ton of Big Priest and they would get taunts in the way that I couldn't get through, the Sinister Strikes helped me get that extra lethal in that I needed. Sadly, there's no Shaman in here. Shaman's in a horrible spot. But if you wanted to play Shaman, you've got even or Big Shaman. But moving on to Warlock, we've got Reno Lock. This is a list by Hijo. This is a very anti-aggro list, so do play this with caution. You're going to have trouble with this list against greedier decks. But just talking about the anti-aggro tech, you've got the Glacial Shards in here to help you against the Kingsbane Rogues. You've got the Wax Elemental to help you against aggro. You've also got Bone Wraith in here to help you against aggro. There is a Ticketus in here as a little bit of greed to give you a chance against slower decks. You'll notice there is no Mal'Ganis in this list, so if you really want Mal'Ganis, maybe pull out the Ticketus. But if your meta is incredibly aggressive, this would be a great Reno Lock list to climb with. Discard Warlock. This is a pretty stock list. Mr. 37 is the current Discard Warlock person to go to. You'll notice that it does have the Darkglares in here, so it does do a little bit of the Darkglare thing, but that's not the point of the deck. The point of the deck is to try and discard your hand of Guldans, get incredibly large amount of cards in your hand, slam everything down, cheat things out, and kill your opponent very quickly. While Discard Warlock is very good, Darkglare Warlock is the best Warlock deck you could play. And I'm featuring a little bit of a different list than you may have seen in the past. This is a list by Paradox, who you may know, who frequently is #1 legend on the Asia server. And so this list, it's not running the Moltens, it's just running the Flesh Giants. But what you'll notice here is you've got Revenant Rascals. So this is instead of the, I think it's called the, where's the Spell Lady card? You know the one. The one that makes the spells cost one more. Cult Neophyte. So instead of Cult Neophyte, we see the Revenant Rascals in here that destroys a mana crystal for each player. You've also got a Manari Mosher in here, 3 mana, 3/4 demon, battle cry, give a friendly demon +3 attack and lifesteal this turn. So this synergizes with the Flesh Giant, helps you heal if you're a little too low, and also just helps you trade favorably if you need to. So you can aim that on some of the cheap demons in this list. That's where you'll notice that there are the imps, both Flame Imp and Malchezaar, as well as the Voidwalkers. There's the Canrathad in here because, again, you've got a lot of cheap demons. You want to cheat them out. But otherwise, it's Darkmoon Warlock, but just with a bit of a twist, and I'd highly recommend trying it out. Finishing up with Warrior, we have Odd Warrior by Evil Devil. So this is a very anti-aggro build of Odd Warrior. I know Odd Warrior is anti-aggro, but this specific build, it's not running any top-end greed, so you're not seeing Dr. Boom Mad Genius, you're not seeing Elsiana, and that's because this list does include the Silas Darkmoon combo. It's great if you're not up against a Druid or in the mirror. But otherwise, you've also got a Cobalt Sticky Finger for the Kingsbane Rogue, but you just do your Odd Warrior thing, hit the button a lot, clear boards. Again, against slower decks you're going to have trouble, such as Jade Druid or, say, Reno Warlock. But otherwise, it's a solid list if you want to play a slower type of warrior. If you'd like to play a much faster version of Warrior, you've got Pirate Warrior by AAEBAZICAA. He frequently hits early legend with this list, and I personally really like it as well. Some interesting additions that you may not have seen in a lot of lists are the cutting class. So this list is running cutting classes for draw as opposed to running the Voracious Reader. You've got a single Shark Fin Fan in here, which is nice to kind of sneak in some crazy turns with the cannons. You're running 4 cannons, which is pretty normal for Pirate Warrior right now. But otherwise, you'll notice there is no Sir Finley Murgleton. There is no Sky Captain Crag, so if you want to put those in, maybe just take out the cutting classes or take out the Shark Fin Fan. But otherwise, very solid build of Pirate Warrior. If you'd like to try out any of these lists, you'll find all the deck codes in the description below. And if you're a mobile user, there's a link to my Discord. You can visit the deck lists only channel, and it's much easier for you to pick up those deck codes. If you want to help support this channel, you can click the subscribe button, click the notification bell, and until next time, hope to see you again.